All right. Peace and blessings, peace and blessings, peace and blessings. How's everybody doing? All right, we going live on Instagram, going live on YouTube, and right about now, going live on Insight Timer. Peace and blessings, peace and blessings. Let's give it a couple minutes. See who joins us, see who joins the festivities tonight. I believe this is going to be a really good one. Let's see who we got in the house. Let's see who we got in the house. Come on in. Ceremony's about to begin. Ofri. How you doing? Am I saying your name correctly? Is it Ofri? Where are you from? Okay, cool. Where you from? Where you connecting from? BC, Canada? Okay. Glad that you're here tonight. What's going on, my brother? Blessings. Peace and blessings. Good to see you, man. You came in and get some of this knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. That's a friend of mine. We grew up together. I'm glad he's here. Marcus Fong. How are you, sir? We got a good signal. We got a good connection. Isa too. I'm glad you stopped by. I don't know how to say your name though. I apologize. You doing good? I'm glad to hear it. Glad to hear it. You're doing good, Marcus. We're getting ready. Higher call. You do music, Marcus? I need some music. I just found a app where I can do a recording at home. It's called Audacity, and I want to do some guided meditations. So maybe we can connect on doing some music. Absolutely, I do. Absolutely, I do. I need some music for my meditations. I want to upload some new meditations to Insight Timer really badly. And I had a guy who was doing the music for me and doing the recording for me, but he ended up getting busy with some other projects. All right, cool. Yeah, definitely. If you can contact me, that'd be excellent. I said it perfect. Great. Good. Right now, we're just chilling, waiting to see who stops by. And yeah, we just usually just chill for the first 7 minutes. You know what I mean? Shoot the shot. Conversate for a little bit. Then at the 7-minute mark, we hop on in. So I'm just checking to see how everybody's feeling. Isa too, how are you feeling tonight? The beard look good. Yeah, I just put some. My mom got me a box of like this beard kit that has some oil in it, some kind of like beard cream in it. So I mixed that with the other cream I use for my hair, and it ended up making it look nice and fluffy. Trish, how are you? First time from Toronto? Okay, cool. Hopefully you enjoy it. We usually hang out 11:11 every Wednesday. It's your first time in the session too, Ofri? Okay. 11:11 every Wednesday. We're gonna try to have some fun. I really want to talk about this. Feeling good, feeling great. Glad to hear it. I'm feeling good too. Usually I'll be up all day before I do these live streams at 11:11. But today I said, man, I'm old. Let me take a little nap. So I took a nap earlier today, and I feel resurrected. I feel amazing. It's gonna be a real exciting live stream. I'm getting amped up, rubbing my hands and everything. I'm excited. All right, so we're getting closer to that 7-minute mark where we usually begin. So this week I'm doing the importance of or the power of story, because we all tell ourselves stories. Next week I think I'm gonna do one on I take a naps all my life. Yeah, you would know. You know me pretty much longer than anybody. But yeah, next week I'm thinking about doing one on the Lafafa Sedek, which is an Ethiopian. They call it a Book of the Dead. I'm thinking about doing one. I'm thinking about doing one on that one because I don't think a lot of people know about that. I did one where I was making a lot of references to the Egyptian book that it did, the Per and Heru. Um, Now I wanna do one on the Lafafa deck. I think that's a pretty cool book. So next week I might do the Lafafa deck, or I might do something a little less esoteric. But I think that's 90%. 90% sure I'm gonna do that. Nothing to do with being old. Yeah, that's true. That's true. That's true. I'm still young. I just feel more tired now. I get a certain amount of combustible energy throughout the day. So I gotta save my energy. I can't use all my energy for my job. Oh, for you said you can sense my energy? Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I really appreciate that. I'm gonna get started in a few more minutes, like a minute and a half. We're gonna get started. About a minute and a half more, we'll get started, and we're gonna try and have some fun. Naps are gold, Trish. I agree with you 1,000,000%. I agree with you 1,000,000%. But I got a nap in earlier today. I'm going to bed after I do this, so I won't have no excuse tomorrow. I got to get up tomorrow morning to work out. I have to. It's been a struggle trying to conquer the morning, but I got to get up. I got to get up tomorrow morning to work out before I go to work. So I got a nap in. I ain't gonna have no excuse. To say you still working out? You still working out, bro? You still monster mashing? All right. We are a few seconds away. We are going to get ready to start. All right. So what I want to do today is I want to talk about the human mind as a computer and how you program your mind. I realize that with a lot of us, what we do is we end up creating these programs that pretty much confine us our entire lives when we could be using that same programming to set us free. How do you program the human mind? You program the human mind through narrative. You create stories. And by creating a story that we give ourselves and that we tell ourselves all the time, that story is what pretty much guides our entire existence. And it's a story that we're constantly telling ourselves. We very rarely update it, especially if you're a person who's going through trauma. We very rarely update the story so that we can set ourselves free. We typically use the story as a means of giving ourselves a set of boundaries and parameters in which to function. And if you're a person who has used your story to increase your success, you use your story to build yourself up, you use your story to master yourself, there's nothing wrong with that. But quite often we use our stories as a form of imprisoning ourselves. And quite often we're given the story at birth. All of the stories that we utilize, we're given these stories at birth with very little say in the role that we're expected to play within the stories. And we're given the stories by our families, by society, by our religion. We're given all of these stories that tell us who we're supposed to be. But the unfortunate thing about it is that none of these stories, or very few of these stories, tell us that we're supposed to be great. They tell us that we're supposed to fit in. They tell us that we're supposed to obey. They tell us that we're supposed to follow the rules, follow societal expectations. None of these stories have told us that we are God. None of these stories have told us that we are divine. And none of these stories have told us that we are free. You'll see that most of the stories that you've been given are stories that are given to you so you can become a better employee, a better servant to others. And there's nothing wrong with serving the community, but at the same time, your energy should be used in unlocking your own divine potential. And you can do both at the same time. You can serve the community, serve the nation. You can be a good citizen, a good employee, follow the rules, follow the laws, and still tap into your own divinity. The fact that you're being told a story that convinces you that one is mutually exclusive of the other goes to show you how dangerous these stories can be. Stories can be very, very dangerous because whenever there's a shift in our culture, there's stories to go along with it. I used to watch a lot of black and white films when I was a kid. It was like my favorite thing. And I just used to, my mind used to, Ava, greetings. My mind used to be blown because I would watch these old World War I movies and World War II movies. I used to love black and white films, and it just blew my mind how many of these films were out there. They were creating this narrative to program people and tell us how to behave during this time of a national crisis. Vietnam, same thing. Mental models, exactly, Ofri. So these narratives were very, very powerful because they were guiding people's behavior. They were getting people to engage in this war, to engage in certain behavioral patterns, to make certain sacrifices, just with these films. That's what propaganda is. Propaganda is offering you a narrative to control your behavior. Same thing you'll notice with 9/11. You know, I don't know how old everybody else is, but I'm old enough to remember 9/11. I remember exactly when it happened. I remember exactly what I was doing at the time when 9/11 happened. Immediately afterward, almost like the next week, there were a whole bunch of films about it. I'm like, where all these movies come from? But they needed those movies to give you the narrative to continue to control people's behavior because they didn't want people freaking out and they didn't want people siding with the enemy, because there actually were a few Americans. If you can remember, there was this one kid who, for whatever reason, went to the Taliban. I think they executed him for treason or something like that. So in order to keep people on the straight and narrow, they created all these narratives to keep controlling people's behavior. But the thing about it is, it's not all just these big epic stories. Sometimes it is smaller stories to control your behavior. And you, quite often, on an unconscious level, are writing the story. You're writing the story. You're the one creating the story about who you are. But you're doing it unconsciously. And therefore, you can't tap into your greatness because you're not aware that you're doing it. You might have a big vision, but if you keep using the same programming, the same narrative, it's inevitable you're going to end up stuck. And many of us do, and I've been stuck. The human mind needs narrative. We need it. We've been telling stories almost as long as we've been communicating. We need these stories so we can know how to behave. And these stories, these narratives, they first of all explain the origin of the universe. They give us moral education. They implant within us societal expectations, and they tell us our roles in society, our roles in our families, our roles in our government, right? And we do the same thing. We all have our own stories that do the exact same thing, but on a microcosmic level, not a macrocosmic level. So on a microcosmic level, your stories explain your origin. But instead of explaining the origin of the universe, it's explaining why you are the way you are. Where'd your identity come from? They give us moral education. So quite often we have these stories about why there are certain things we won't do. Or with some people, they have stories to explain why they don't care and they do what they want, right? We use our stories to implement societal expectations upon ourselves. So quite often you see a lot of individuals saying, I can't do that. What will people think? And there's a story behind that. There's a story why they will hold themselves back from engaging in certain activities. They'll hold themselves back from going against societal expectations, right? And then they have stories to explain their roles, whether those roles are positive or negative. Why they are the one who keeps losing in life, the one who keeps disappointing the family, the one who keeps abusing other people, because everybody got a story about why they're abusive. If you find somebody who's abusive or disrespectful to women or disrespectful to men, or somebody who is an unfit parent, there's always a story. We create these stories constantly because we want to basically have a reason for. Human beings need reasons, and the story is the reason. The narrative is the reason, right? So let's start with the first one, moral education. Actually, no, that's not the first one. The first one explains our origin, right? We have an identity. Our narrative explains the origin of our identity. And quite often, the story is the reason, narrative is the reason. Yes, Lisa. And quite often, one of the major things that we use in our narrative to explain our behavior is trauma. It's trauma. And the thing about it is you get a lot of individuals who become aware of the fact that the trauma is affecting them, and they use that to imprison themselves. Some people create their entire identity based on trauma. I was hurt as a child. That's why it's hard for me to love. I can't function in relationships because I was abused. I can't make things work because I was hurt. I've known individuals like that. Someone who I was personally very close to at one point in time was an individual who would not work. He was consistently high, consistently drunk, consistently figuring out ways to manipulate people to get what he wanted. And he always had the story, well, when I was a kid, I was molested. And I'm not judging them or hating on them, but I'm using that as an example to show you how trauma can shape your entire identity. All his behavioral patterns, all his actions were based upon his own trauma. So his trauma imprisoned him because he kept using the programming of the trauma to explain his behavior. At no point in time did he say, I can overcome this trauma and change my identity. For him, thank you for the donation, Marcus. For him, the trauma was the identity. For him, the pain that he went through as a child became who he was. So keeping the secret, being manipulative because he couldn't tell his parents what was happening, learning how to live with shame. So when he did certain things that were hurting other people, he would feel ashamed, but he had to learn how to live with the shame. His whole identity was based upon the pain of that trauma. So he he used that trauma as an entire narrative to explain his origin. This is why I am the way I am, because of the pain that I went through. That's my story. And quite often the story became very confining. You had this individual who I knew he was a genius, creative genius, charismatic, cool person, but never fully tapped into his potential because he kept using that narrative as a crutch. So the identity he created was, well, not he created, but circumstances created, was based upon that trauma, and it kept him from being great. His story was, I am the way I am because of the trauma. His story was not, I survived despite the trauma, and I'm going to exceed in all things that I do. Who knows how far he could have gone if he had a different narrative, a different set of programming in his mind. Also, your narrative could be based upon your parental influences. I've worked with young kids, usually troubled kids, for years. Thank you, Marcus. I appreciate you. For years, I worked with kids who were troubled kids, and they had a story too. And I remember working with this one young man. He was a funny little dude. I think he was about 11 years old. And one day he was flipping out on somebody because he was always flipping out, losing his temper. And one day he said, I got anger issues, like my mom. And it was a very casual thing because his mother's behavior and her issues explained his issues. So at no point in time, and he was very young, so I'm not knocking him or blaming him, but at no point in time did he say to himself, well, my mom's behavior doesn't necessarily have to explain me. Yep, you're right. It's so important to get help. Gotta get help. And also, there's my favorite writer, Salman Rushdie, and I don't read fiction very often, but Salman Rushdie at one point in time was like my favorite fiction writer. And there was a book he wrote, a very controversial book, The Satanic Verses. And it was a big part of the book was the main character's relationship with his father, because he felt that his father neglected him. His father wasn't loving enough. His father wasn't supportive enough. But then one day he got into a conversation, an argument with his dad. And his dad said, I don't explain you anymore. In other words, at some point in time, you have to stop using my influence as a means to explain who you are. At some point in time, you're going to need to let go of the narrative of your parents' influence being the reason for why you are the way you are. And we hear it all the time, right? All the time we hear, my dad drank, so I drink. Even though you know it's destroying you, the narrative effect on the brain is so powerful, you'll keep drinking until you die just because that's your story. I drink because my dad drank. I have anger issues because my mom has anger issues. I'm fighting all the time because I grew up and my uncle was always fighting. My uncle was the one who I was the closest to. He was always fighting. These narratives that we create leave us so trapped that we can literally look and see that there's no end in sight, and that the only end for us is going to be our own self-destruction, and we'll stick to the narrative. No ad-libbing, stick to the script, in the words of Jay-Z. We'll stick to the script until we die. That's how powerful the programming of narrative is. And of course, societal influence. Societal influence is another narrative that we have to explain why we are the way we are. So we quite often will say, I grew up poor. I never had anything. That's why it's hard for me to move forward. It's hard for me to have expectations for something great because the environment I grew up with, we didn't have anything. It's hard for me to want to reach for something higher because the school I went to, or my home environment, or the city where I grew up, or I was in a gang, right? So we use all of these things to create this narrative. This narrative becomes a coffin, and we die in it. You die in your narrative, and sometimes the narrative has to be changed so we can live. The next one, moral education. Stories are in essence about limits, right? You're given these narratives to give you an idea of your personal potential, but also an idea of your limits. And morals are limits, things that you won't go against, things that you won't question, things you won't do. So the stories that we tell ourselves are a way of us programming ourselves so that we can put boundaries up. I'm not going to go past this point. I'm not going to question this behavior. I'm not going to go against what I've been raised to believe in, right? So you have these moral boundaries that you set up for yourself, and these limits upon your own capacities you give yourself because of the narrative you repeat in your head every single day. Right and wrong are based on narrative. At one point in time, people gave us holy books like the Bible, and your whole idea of right and wrong was based upon the Bible, based upon the words of Jesus Christ, based upon the behavior of King David. Our whole idea of what's right and what's wrong is based upon these books that we were given, these books that were written thousands of years ago. And these narratives, these stories are so powerful and so profound, they affect us, and they affect our ideas of what we're supposed to do, how we're supposed to live even to this day. Even though society has changed so much, the world has changed so much, technology's changed so much, but human beings are not changing because we're living off those same old narratives. Not saying that I don't find wisdom and beauty in these books, but we have to, after a while, we have to start asking ourselves, is it time for a new narrative? Is it time for a new understanding? Is it time for a new mythology? You're storytelling, you teach storytelling? Yeah, how the story can imprison us. Yeah, exactly. It can be used insidiously to keep us down. Exactly what I'm talking about. Keep in mind, even politics, they use narrative, right? And I don't want to get political. I don't want to argue, debate with anybody about politics. I'm not a political guy. I believe in empowering the individual, and empowering the individual, organizing the individual is a way for us to get power, right? So I'm not against politics, but I'm against nonsense and illusion and lies. And much of politics is based on illusion. It's based on these narratives. I mean, think about it. How many people you know voted for Joe Biden, not because anything Joe Biden said, but because the narrative that Trump was so evil? And I'm not a Trump supporter at all. I don't support any of these guys. But I know a lot of individuals who voted for Trump voted for Biden because of the narrative that Trump was so evil. And I know a lot of individuals who voted for Trump because of the narrative that liberals and the Democrats were so evil. If you ask the average person who hates Trump, why do you hate Trump? Well, he's racist. Well, all the presidents have been racist. Why? What's the real reason? And they don't have one. They just fell for a narrative. You ask people why they voted for Joe Biden. I voted for Joe Biden because he's not Trump. It's a narrative. You were given a mythology. You were given a mythology, and you voted based upon your personal mythology. And you can say the same thing for so many other people. The story about Barack Obama. I know a lot of individuals who love Barack Obama. You ask them why, what policies, what did he do that was so great? Most people have no idea about political policy. They don't know at all. You're wasting your time asking them that. But they gave you such a great myth with Barack Obama. Young kid, biracial, raised by his mom. Father was an African diplomat. Came from a lowly family. Ended up becoming a community organizer in Chicago. Became well known, well respected, well loved, and the world can change. Let's vote for Barack Obama. What policies did Barack Obama enact that was so powerful and wonderful? He was a symbol of change. He was a great story. Voted for a really good story, and most of your behavior is shaped by really well orchestrated narratives, and that's it. And you tell yourself these stories too. How many stories have we told ourselves? I can't do that because. I won't do that because. Even things that will benefit you. I can't do that because. Right? The next one, societal expectations. Mm. Societal expectations is an interesting one because I was thinking a lot about movies, relationships. What are your relationship expectations? And where do we get them from? We get so many of our, at least me as a kid growing up, I was, a wide-eyed, starry-eyed romantic. So I got a lot of my perspective from relationships from rom-coms. I was a kid, I wasn't doing a whole lot of dating when I was young. I was raised in a strict Christian household. I wasn't really going out that much and doing that much. So all my ideas about love and women were from romantic comedies. And then you start dating using the stuff that you see in romantic comedies in real life. It don't work. It don't work because women are not like these rom-com characters, and men are not like these rom-com characters. But if that's what you expect from relationships, it's going to be miserable out there until you learn how to enjoy real life and change your narrative. But we've been given these rom-com narratives, and I think the fact that you're right, marketing, the fact that we've been marketed these ideas about what our marriage should be and what we should expect, that's why marriages are failing. We have this idea about societal expectations of what we expect in relationships, and all this rom-com nonsense has us completely confused and miserable. They don't tell you how to deal with being in a relationship with somebody, staying in a relationship because y'all have kids together. You want to make it work for the kids. You never see that in no rom-com. You never see a situation in a rom-com where you're with somebody who you really care about and the connection is lost, and all of a sudden somebody outside of the relationship wants to jump in because they feel connected to you and you're connected with them, but you want to do the right thing. They don't tell you that in rom-coms. If I had known about this stuff, it would have saved me a lot of time and energy in relationships, how to make better decisions. If we weren't educated about relationships, we were entertained by the idea of relationships and given these narratives that make no sense. Really, in the real world, they're not applicable. What you see in romantic comedy is just not applicable. It's cute, it's fun, sweet. If you like sugar, but I don't want to eat sugar all the time. Yep, many people don't question the narrative or know they're in one. You're right. You're 100% correct. We are in a matrix. And unfortunately, just like in the movie The Matrix, the people in the matrix could become agents at any moment. We are agents in our own matrix. We imprison ourselves in our own matrix and make sure we don't get out of it. That's with these boundaries and with these narratives. I remember the day I found a book called The Religions of Man by Houston Smith and started questioning religion. And I remember like I was like almost like having a panic attack because it was so hard to get past the narrative that I grew up with and start analyzing things from a different perspective. I remember my heart was beating. I'm standing there in my room like with the Bible in my hand, and I'm like, drenched in sweat, almost like the scene in the Bible where Jesus is in a garden of Gethsemane. He's telling God, pass this cup before me. That's how I was, because I was getting past the narrative and going into something much deeper and more spiritual. And I was afraid to do it because the narrative programming was so powerful. But here we all are. I think about my childhood concepts of what it is to be a man. I remember Rambo. Remember Rambo, the Rambo character? Like he would just walk into situations with a machine gun, and that solved all his problems. And as a young man, you're taught aggression. Aggression is the way to solve. You got a problem, use aggression. Somebody say something you don't like, use aggression. You're not really a man. You're not masculine if you can't properly use aggression. And I'm an advocate of being a man and standing your ground and all of that kind of stuff. But at the same time, being a man is more complicated than that. The whole idea of the man who's emotionally muted is something that we've pretty much given up. As a man, you're going to have emotions. As a man, you're going to have more needs than just the need to use a machine gun to solve problems. You got to use, compromise and you have to use your knowledge, wisdom, and understanding to connect with other people. And you have to use diplomacy, and you have to use humility to solve a lot of problems. Emotional maturity and understanding boundaries. Exactly. Imagine, I look back on my adolescence and my early years and remember and just think back on all the times where we used aggression to solve problems and anger to solve problems and how many times we desperately failed. But if I had grown up with a different narrative of what a man can do and should do, things may have been different. But my narrative was based on action movies from the 1980s and 90s. You know, you put yourself in dangerous situations and scoff at danger, and as long as you have a gun and a one-liner, you'll be all right. It's nonsensical. And another, way that our narrative tells us societal expectations is slave movies. You notice there's a lot of slave movies that come out. The more racial tension there is in America, yeah, get in the chopper, get in the chopper. Yeah, you work with a bunch of men who pretended didn't have emotions except the controls. Yeah, exactly. It was exactly. A lot of men go around pretending like they don't have emotions because and a lot of times that's based upon societal expectations and also upon fear. You get your heart broke when you're 13. I know a lot of guys who get their heart broke when they're 14 and never get over it. A lot of guys have that narrative. Yeah, I remember when I was 14, I was in love with this girl, but she liked somebody else who was a jerk. So women like jerks, so I'm a jerk now. That goofy narrative. That silly, stupid narrative. I hate that story. I'm a jerk now and I get more girls. Oh my God, I hate that story. But anyhow, yeah. You ever notice like every time there's a situation where there's a protest or uprising based upon race or police brutality, and there's more and more slave movies coming out. There's so many slave movies coming out. They invest so much money in slave movies. It's insane. It's a narrative. Most of what you've been taught about slavery ain't real. But we've been given this narrative to tell you what society's expectations is for black people. We expect you to behave like this. See these little friendly slaves? We want you to act like this slave. Look at this story. Look at this great story about this slave. How wonderful this slave. It was so entertaining, gosh, golly gee. The slave narrative. And you never know how great you can be. I remember when I was a kid, at the school where I went to Quirk Middle School. Yep, we went to Quirk Middle School, and for a field trip, they took us to go see that movie Malcolm X. And I had a lot of teachers who were white, and they did not want us to see that film. And then when we came back from the film, I found the experience to be very enlightening. I thought it was really cool. It taught me a lot I didn't know. And in the movie, Malcolm X mentioned something about black people and what we were doing before slavery. And I remember I went to my teacher, and his name was Mr. Quagliaroli. Little dude with a big old mustache. And I asked him, what were black people doing before slavery? Because that's all we ever heard about was slavery in school. Slavery. So I asked my teacher, what were black people doing before slavery? And he said, your history doesn't start until slavery. I was like, what? He said, yeah, your history doesn't start until slavery, which in my mind blew my mind because they taught us that in school, black people were on the planet before anybody else. But we weren't doing anything. All those millions of years, we were just sitting around waiting to be enslaved. It didn't make any sense to me. And I remember that really affected my behavior. After I heard that, I was a pretty good kid. I was pretty smart. I got along with my teachers. After I heard that, I kind of went through a period where I kind of lost my mind a little bit and stopped caring about school. I kind of started acting out a little bit. And I was going through other things at home as well. But I remember that event very specifically. I felt like my behavior didn't matter because I didn't have the capacity to contribute anything. As smart as I was, I heard so many people my whole life tell me, oh, you're so smart. You're such a gifted kid. You're so brilliant. But I got that slave narrative. And it's a good thing I got out of that because I was able to tap into my divinity and tap into my inner greatness. And now my world is opening up because I got out of that stupid narrative. And it's so much more to black history and so much more to me than just free labor, cheap labor. And there's so many people I've met over the years who are stuck in that narrative. I told a guy, I used to work with this black dude. I forgot his name. I think it was Matt or something like that. And I was so excited because I wanted to start my own business. He said, oh, you can't do that. I said, why? What you mean I can't do that? He said, you can't open your own business. Black folks can't do stuff like that. He really believed that because he bought into the narrative. So you had a guy who, women loved this dude. He was real charismatic, real smooth, very intelligent. He could have used his intelligence to end up in politics. He had the look. He had the bald head. He was smooth. He was cool. He could have been a politician or an architect or anything. But he ended up working in a hospital, at a lower end job because he believed that narrative. It's crazy. You create this box or someone gives you this box to live in for the rest of your life. Life justified. How you doing? But societal expectation lies in these narratives. Now, another thing is our narratives give us our roles. You have a role. We're going to give you a role. And the narrative is going to tell you what role you play. And quite often we're giving these roles in our childhood. And there's a narrative behind these roles. If you're the black sheep of the family, you've been given that because, oh, you remind me of your uncle. Your uncle was a drunk. Now you're or like, unfortunately, I remember when I was young, I was the quote unquote good one. And my older brother was a quote unquote bad one. So that's the roles we played. And for years, there was this weird conflict between us that I didn't understand. And now that I'm older, I think, wow, maybe being labeled as the good one and he's labeled as the bad one, maybe that had that effect on us. I mean, we had so all kinds of things, all kinds of stories about how we were at odds with each other. Yeah, it's all crumbling. Signs of a new day. Exactly. But I'm just thinking back how me and my brother, I'm laughing because I remember one time I was this girl that I liked, and she would call the house for me every now and again. She, we were just friends, but I liked her more than as a friend. But she never saw me as that. And sometimes she would call the house for me and just talk. And I remember one time I was out at a house and he picked up the phone and he started smooth talking to her. You know what I mean? Started trying to get with her. And then like later on that day, or maybe 2 days later, she called me and said, yeah, your brother tried to holler at me. And I remember like it was a girl he used to mess with. And I ended up, connecting with her. I forgot how I ended up going to her house trying to get with her. So he was trying to get with some girl I like. I'm trying to get with some girl that he was trying to get back. It was so goofy. But we felt like we were at odds with each other. And for what? Because he was the bad one, I was the good one. Now imagine if, we had a different narrative. We might be best of friends. If only we had a different narrative. If only I could have learned from it. I could have learned a lot from that guy. I could have learned so much from my older brother. He was a person who was charismatic. He was well liked. He was definitely a ladies' man, definitely confident in himself, definitely had the hustler spirit because he could always figure out ways to get money. He was a person who had a natural born leader's capacity. I could have learned from him as opposed to feeling like I had to avoid him and be at odds with him. Are we friends now? Not really. There's still, that's my brother. I'm always gonna love my brother, but we don't even really speak, unfortunately. And my younger brother, him and my older brother, my younger brother has they have a lot of issues between them. But no, we don't, even to this day. Because of that narrative of me being the good one and him being the bad one. Unfortunately. It was your sister. You were labeled as the bad one. Yeah, but imagine if you had a different label. Imagine if we didn't label our kids like that. Imagine if we didn't give them that narrative. You know what I mean? Imagine if we didn't give people the narrative of you remind me of your deadbeat uncle. You remind me of your deadbeat dad. You remind me of whoever. So this is who you are. You're them reincarnated. I'm giving you this story so I can give you your role to make it easier to understand and control you. Just imagine how differently we can live. I mean, just think about all the energy we waste in trying to fight against, how much energy we waste going along with the narrative. And then when you want to break free, you got to go against the narrative before you can finally be free to tap into your greatness and tap into your divinity. Imagine if somebody just gave you a different story, a healthy one, a non-judgmental one. Imagine if somebody taught you instead, that instead of teaching you that you're bad or whatever, imagine somebody taught you that you were innately born divine. And you don't have to look up in the sky for God. You look within yourself for the being. I was meditating the other day and I just realized, oh my God, like my mind was blown. I was like, within this corporeal shell, there is a being, a spirit. You can't touch it. You can't see it, but it's there. I know it's there because I can look out in the world and see it. So I know it must be within me. And if somebody had told me from an early age that there is something divine in you that animates you, that has the capacity to create reality because it's creating your body. Your consciousness is creating your body. Your body is just atoms, it's empty space. It's mostly empty space, but there needs to be something inside of you to hold that empty space into the form and shape of a body and a person. And once that thing, whatever it is, that being within you is no longer there, then the body actually falls apart. Your body literally falls apart. That's what decomposition is. Your body is falling apart because the spirit within you is no longer there. And if they told you that that spirit within you was divine and you could utilize it and tap into it as a wellspring of cosmic power and as a way of connecting to a higher power, the divine, the absolute, God, imagine if you were taught that. Imagine if you were taught that. Imagine what you could do if you were taught that as a child. My son asked me one time, he said, Daddy, where is God? I said, God is inside you, baby. And then he thought about it for a second. He said, Daddy, did we eat God? So he didn't quite understand the concept, but I planted the seed. But I want to see how it's going to affect his brain growing up. I can't make money on that. And most comes back to power over others for money. Susan, you are right. You're very right about that. But there are ways to channel God force into making money. As a matter of fact, I should talk about that. How you can use the God force within yourself so you could create your reality, create a better reality. But I'd rather show you. I'd rather accomplish it first. You know what I mean? I feel like my life has changed as my mind has opened up. So when I start manifesting more around me, I want to start talking about that more. I don't want to. One thing I used to hate as a kid was having somebody be a prosperity preacher and they don't have anything. So I'm gonna wait. But I want to talk about that. You definitely can. Oh my God, I want to talk about it now. I'm getting amped up again. I was winding down, getting pumped up again. But I'm gonna wait. But that's a very good point, Susan. So why am I talking about all of this? And as you can see, I'm gonna show y'all this. As you can see, my notes have come to an end. So now I'm just going to talk from the heart. There comes a time when it may become necessary for you to destroy your identity. Every story about some kind of enlightenment involves a form of symbolic death or a confrontation. In Buddhism, there was a confrontation between Buddha and Mara, the evil one. In Buddhism, there is no devil, but they believe in Mara, the evil one. And they say some people teach that Mara is a being separate from us. Others teach that Mara, the evil one, is an aspect of our own being. And the Buddha, when he was Siddhartha, had to literally die as Siddhartha to become awakened. He had to leave Siddhartha's life behind, which meant he left his family. Now, I don't advocate that. I don't advocate leaving your kids and your wife so you can become enlightened. I don't advocate that. But he had to leave that behind. Look at the symbolism of it. Don't take that as literal. Don't take it as I'm gonna wake up tomorrow and leave my kids in the house by themselves. And no. But he had to leave much of himself behind. Oh, peace. What's going on, brother? What's going on, cuz? He had to leave himself behind and destroy his identity to create a new narrative. His identity was based upon his father's beliefs. His father was a king. Siddhartha was a prince. And he told him, and the king was told that Siddhartha would either be a wise man or a great warrior, a great king. He chose for him to be a great warrior and a great king. So he raised him in a way, trying to nurture him and foster him to become a political figure, powerful, fearless, right? But the Buddha had to break out of that narrative. He could have stayed where he was and follow his father's instructions. And he could have been a character in a story his father wrote. Like all of us. We're all characters in stories our mothers and fathers wrote. But he had to leave that identity behind and therefore destroy that narrative. He had to destroy that narrative. We had to destroy our own narrative. I mean, when I was trying to break free of my depression and all the stuff that I was going through, you have no idea how many times in my mind I would repeat these stories in my mind over and over again all day. Because it was programming. In order for it to work, you have to constantly use it over and over and over again. And how many times during the course of the day do you find yourself repeating negative stories Oh, I went through this as a kid. I went through that as a kid. You are programming yourself by repeating the narratives that somebody else gave you. You are the manifestation of somebody else's story. You're the manifestation of somebody else's understanding of reality. And you're only going to become a manifestation of your own inner being, the being we were talking about, the God within you that we were talking about. You're only going to become a manifestation of that once you change your programming. But you have to tap into that. You have to look within yourself and find out who you are so you can write your own story. You have to look within yourself and find out who you are so you can write your story. Be the creator of your story, not just a person following your programming. And that means you're going to have to change some things. And you're going to have to change some physical things. Stop watching TV. I'm not saying totally cut it out. I still watch karate movies. I still watch anime. But I had to stop watching so much TV. I used to watch a lot of TV as a kid. It programmed me. It misprogrammed me. And you can literally, I've seen people literally lose their mind when they come in contact with reality. I remember there was one kid I was talking to at my job, and he's telling me one thing, and I'm like, no, that's not true. And I'm explaining to him scientifically how what he believed wasn't true, and it wasn't real. And I literally saw his brain short circuit. He said, ah, and ran out the room. Because he had been so thoroughly programmed. I've seen people literally like just break down and they see once they hear the truth, their brains can't handle it. I've seen people literally just shut down. How many times have you having a conversation with somebody where you're exposing truth to them and they literally shut down? The narrative, the programming is so powerful in their brain, they literally can't understand it. TV programs, exactly. TV programming. Oh, you lost me for 10 minutes? Is the signal okay now? I'm getting an excellent signal. Is the issue on your end or my end, Marcus? Because here it says I have had an excellent or a good signal pretty much all night. Well, I hope the issue's resolved so you can join us. Yeah, but like I was saying, the programming is so powerful. I've seen people break down. But that's a good thing. That's why it's a good thing to nurture confidence within yourself. It's a good thing to nurture confidence within yourself. You want to know why? Because in order for you to change your narrative and change your programming, guess what you're going to have to do? You're going to have to break. But don't be afraid of breaking. Don't be afraid to break, but you're going to have to, Stockholm, exactly. You're going to have to break. Your identity is going to have to break, and that's upsetting. You're gonna feel physically ill as you destroy your identity. You're gonna be terrified. I've been in situations, I told y'all, when I began to awaken, I started feeling like I was having panic attacks when I started studying things outside of what I was taught. My body is if your brain is programmed to accept something, your body is programmed to accept it. So your body will literally go to war with truth. You'll feel like you're in a fight or flight situation because somebody's telling you the truth. Why do you think there are deception industries? There are insecurity industries. There's literally companies who make billions of dollars upon your ignorance and your fear and your insecurities. If it wasn't important for you to feel insecure and be lied to, people wouldn't build businesses around it. And your body will go to war with you. Your brain will go to war with you. You'll stop sleeping for a little while. You will be afraid to eat for a little while. You might lose some relationships, either for a little while or permanently. But that's the cost of awakening and being able to look at the world and see the world as it is. Osho said, you only know reality when you have nothing to project. Meaning that everywhere you look, every situation you see, you are projecting what's inside you onto the situation. And that's my next topic that I want to talk about. I got something called mirror theory. Mirror theory. I'm going to go in depth on that next week. That's what I'm going to do. Mirror theory. But once you empty yourself of all your conditioning and all your goofy stories and all your narratives, you'll be empty and you'll be able to see things as they are. That's why so many situations, everybody else gets so worked up and freaked out and panicked. I used to work at a job where there would be individuals who were kids who were gangbangers. There'd be kids who were murderers. There'd be kids who would just do all kinds of stuff, crazy. And everybody would freak out whenever these kids had issues. I was always calm, and they would always be amazed. Like, how'd you stay calm? Am I recording? Yeah, I'm definitely recording. I'm recording on YouTube. I got it on Insight Timer, and this is on Instagram, and I'm going to download this. After I'm done recording on Instagram, I'm going to download it and keep the video. But yeah, so what happens is once you empty yourself of your narrative, then you'll finally be free. And you could put with, there's an old Hindu poem where they're talking about the god Shiva. He says, because you love the burning ground, I've made a burning ground of my heart so that you can do thy eternal dance. In other words, he's saying, I've burned everything inside of me. I got rid of all of it. Now God can come in. But in order to do that, you got to destroy your narrative. And your narrative ain't doing you no good anyway. Your narrative is something you cling to because it feels safe and comfortable. But last week we talked about the hero quest archetype and how the first step of the hero's story is to leave the comfort zone. Your narrative is your comfort zone. Your narrative is your security blanket. Remember Linus from Charlie Brown? The kid who had the blanket he carried with him everywhere he went. That's a sign that he was afraid of something. Do I have advice to share around how to enter the battle peacefully? Yeah, preparation. I met this one. I was on a yacht, not a yacht. I'm sorry. I was on a cruise ship years ago. There was a guy who was a Marine, and he had snuck some marijuana on the boat. And at this time, I was going through major insomnia, couldn't sleep, so I'd be up for days. And I was walking around the boat at night by myself, and I met this Marine. And he was like, "Yeah, come smoke with me, man. I don't like smoking by myself." I'm like, "Nah, I don't smoke, but I'll roll with you." So he's smoking, and as he's smoking, I said, "How'd you get weed on this boat?" Because they checked me top to bottom. He said, "Man, you got to be careful." He said, "Proper preparation prevents piss poor performance." I said, "What?" He said, "Yo, I prepared to get it on the boat. I planned it carefully. Proper preparation prevents piss poor performance." So if you're gonna go into a spiritual battle, you gotta prepare for it. How you prepare for a spiritual battle? Well, who's your master? I know that's a dangerous word for people. Who's your spiritual master? Whether it's somebody in your personal life or somebody who you follow on YouTube, they gotta be a spiritual master, and you must submit to that master. That's it. Nobody want to talk about that. Let's take it seriously. We're not gonna half step with this one. Who's your spiritual master? Who's the person who gives you your spiritual advice? Who do you seek out for spiritual advice? And I don't care if they're a controversial person or not. I don't care if it's somebody who people don't like. It's okay. It don't all have to be, sunshine and ice cream. It could be somebody who's tough or aggressive, somebody who might be a little controversial. But who's your spiritual master? Who do you quote? Who do you say, "I learned this from so-and-so. So-and-so says this." Study their words, study their actions, study their discipline, study their accomplishments. Second of all, keep your mind open and make spirituality a part of your life. Meditation should be a daily part of your life. Reading and studying should be a daily part of your life. When I first got Instagram, looking at girls was what I did with it. And I said, I don't want to have my brain absorbing all of this prurient information all day. So what I started doing is let me follow Osho. I'm going to follow Inner Engineering. I'm going to follow Sadhguru. I'm going to follow Muji. I'm going to follow people who talk about Haile Selassie, Rastafarians. I'm just everything. So most of us on my timeline is either business oriented or spirituality oriented. Because every single day I'm using the bathroom. I'm waking up in the morning. I'm looking at my phone at some point during the day. And every time I open my phone, I should be getting something positive. I should be getting some kind of armor for this spiritual war. Exactly. You learn a lot from others. You need a good teacher. And your spiritual master might be somebody who you know already. It could be I don't know your family or your life story, but it could be somebody you know already. It could be, your mother, it could be your uncle, it could be your cousin. Luckily for me, I was extremely fortunate. I grew up with a lot of very smart people who had began the journey before I began the journey myself. And so they would give me insight. And I had individuals around, and most of my friends are artists, and most of my friends are guys who are on a spiritual path too. That's another way to prepare for the battle peacefully. Surround yourself with like-minded individuals. I was lucky. I didn't have to go looking. Thank goodness. I ended up, I got family who's on a spiritual path. I got friends who on a spiritual path. I was almost like born into it to an extent. And so when I click up with certain individuals, the conversation is conversations like these. They call it a satsang, where you get individuals together and then connect on a spiritual level and discuss things on a spiritual level. My whole life is one long satsang. All my friends, we get together, we start getting deep. Almost like as soon as we walk through the door, the conversation immediately turns on to some level of what we're learning, what we're reading, where we are spiritually. How's your mental health? How's the journey going? So these are ways to engage in the battle peacefully. But it's a battle, so sometimes it ain't going to be peaceful. So one of the things you're going to have to do is, the first thing you got to do is learn how to be calm in a storm. That's what meditation did for me. Taught me how to be calm in a storm. Meditate. Be mindful. Be calm in the storm. And learn how to let things go. And be aware. Be aware of what's going to trigger you. Certain things, even to this day, certain things might trigger me. And what I'll do is, when I'm in the shower in the morning, or when I'm in certain situations, I take a deep breath and I say to myself, I will not be triggered. And that allows me to be in the present moment without losing control. Because in the battle, you can lose control. But I'm proud of myself. I've been in some tense situations with some things and been able to control it. But that's how you engage. Proper preparation prevents piss poor performance. I'll never forget that. And if you're properly prepared, 9 times out of 10, you're going to win. And if you don't win, even that's a blessing. I saw something from Rumi today. He was talking about, if suffering wasn't a gift from God, why would he give it to all his prophets? Even when you lose, that's bestowal. God is giving you something even when you lose. And you'll realize, man, I thought I lost. And this is something that's been happening to me a lot. I've been saying a lot. I thought I lost. But I was actually being pushed towards something better. I thought I was being rejected, but I got pushed towards something better. I thought I was letting go of something. I was actually grabbing the whole world in my hands. So get comfortable with seeing opportunities in strange places. I think it's important to have discussions and be around people that are, exactly. Exactly. I try my best to be around individuals with a wide range of beliefs, so that way that I don't, and that's another way to keep you from getting stuck in your narrative. Be around people who disagree with you. Be around people who can respectfully say, nah, I don't agree with that. Respectfully. And that way you'll continue to grow. I have friends of mine that say all kinds of crazy stuff. And we sit down and we have conversations about it. And sometimes I'm like, man, he kind of right. It happens a lot. But because I try not to be egotistical, I can see things as they are. And I tell people all the time, agreeing with me is not a prerequisite for my friendship. I care about who you are as a person and how real you are as a person. I don't care if you agree with me on everything. There are certain things that I'm not going to tolerate. I got boundaries too. I'm not going to tolerate a racist. I'm not going to tolerate people who disrespect women. I'm not going to tolerate people who abuse kids. But you agreeing with me on everything, whether it's political or spiritual, that's not necessary. Because I can learn from individuals I disagree with. I can't learn from people who agree with me on every level. So we can disagree. You can tell me I'm wrong, and I can handle it. I actually like it because I like to learn. But we're getting to the hour mark. Been on this for an hour. I'm getting ready to hit the sack and get ready for work tomorrow, or get up to work out tomorrow. I gotta make sure I work out before I begin my day. Peace and blessings to all of y'all. Warrior in the garden. That's a good way to put it, Marcus. Marcus, thank you for your donation. If anybody else donated, thank you very much. I appreciate it. I didn't see it in the chat. I heard there was issues with seeing donations in the chat, but if you did donate and I didn't thank you, I appreciate it. You guys have a wonderful night. Peace and blessings. All right, peace, guys.